Hello, friends. Welcome to our plenary session. I hope you had a wonderful lunch. And I assure you it will only be outdone by our next speaker. Trent Rash has served as the executive director of the Missouri Symphony since August 2019. And this position oversees the day-to-day operations of the MOSI, which has been a cultural mainstay of the Columbia community since 1970. Trent spent 12 years as an assistant professor of music and musical theater at Stevens College, where he was also the executive director of the Summer Theater Institute. Trent attended the University of Missouri, receiving a BS in music education and an MM in vocal performance. In addition to his duties at the Missouri Symphony, Trent has directed, music directed, or been on stage in nearly 50 musicals, working with several theaters in the Columbia community. He is proud to serve on the boards of the Chorus, Columbia's LGBTQIA community choir, and Landlocked Opera, serve as the co-chair of the Columbia Chamber of Commerce Small Business Committee, is a certified Columbia Tourism Ambassador, and is involved with the Columbia ACA Business Club and local leaders. Please join me in welcoming Trent Rash.
Thank you. Thank you, Logan. Thank you, Derek. Thank you to the entire staff, faculty, and administration of Westminster College. This is such a unique and wonderful event. So students, you will look back and you certainly will not regret having this experience. So thank you for making this happen. I am thrilled and honored to be with you today to talk about how external spaces can create internal changes. And when I was approached to do this, and I got the theme of out of this world, it came at really a wonderful time in what's happening in the field of the orchestra. So while I'm going to be using examples from the Missouri Symphony, this is certainly something that is universal across what we're seeing for all orchestras in America today, which is when the pandemic happened, we had to pivot very quickly, and we had to start thinking very creatively. And here on the other side, we know that what people, in order to compete with people's couches and with Netflix and Hulu, that we have to create something that's more than just a concert. And that's a lot of what I will be speaking about today, is how getting out of the concert hall, how thinking beyond the concert hall has helped us to grow and to build our audience and to actually show our impact and relevancy in the Columbia community and the region around us, which includes Fulton as well. So to start, I just want to ask, how many of you have been to a live orchestra concert? Awesome. How many of you were at that concert in a formal concert hall? Is there anyone that's been to an orchestra concert that is not in a formal orchestra hall? Great, okay, a few, but very less few. We're hoping that we're gonna change that. We'll talk about that by the time we get to the end here. So I do wanna take a minute just to talk about the Missouri Symphony. So we are a professional orchestra located right down the street here in Columbia, Missouri. Hugo and Lucy Vianello founded the orchestra in December of 1970. They saw a need in the community. They had come from the Kansas City area. And one of the things I like to say about mid-Missouri is while we have a lot going on, we kind of are a symphonic desert. There's not a lot of orchestras that are located around there. We've got St. Louis all the way to one side of the state, Kansas City Symphony all the way to the other side of the state, and there's not a lot here in the center. So they wanted to create a place where people could come and experience quality music by professional musicians for people that exist here in mid-Missouri. All of our performances mainly take place at the Missouri Theater, which we renovated in 2007. I'm going to talk about that space in just a little bit. We have over 20 concert or events every year. I don't think people realize how much we do. We have a full season, we have a summer festival, we have other parts of our organization that exist, including the conservatory, which offers music education for young musicians. We have a league which raises money through their fundraising events. So it's a very active and probably the largest arts organization in the city of Columbia. So when I was preparing, and you'll have to bear with me, I'm not a scientist, I'm a musician through and through, so I appreciate your grace as I try to think like a scientist for just a moment here. I got curious, and I wanted to really think about, well, what is a physical space? I wanted to know what is the answer to this question. And so there are lots of factors that make up what a physical space is. And one key aspect that I think really applies to what we do in the world of the symphony is tangibility. And so you'll see there that tangibility is physical space in the realm of the tangible and concrete where we can observe and interact with the material world. And what that means for Mosey, or what that means for any orchestra, it's where music finds its home to be made, to be performed, right? Music has to be made somewhere, in some sort of space. And it's where it intersects with that physical space is when that happens. So primarily, the Missouri Symphony has existed making music out of the Missouri Theater. This is a beautiful theater in downtown Columbia that was built by the Bowler brothers in 1928. The Bowler brothers built a lot of theaters in Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, kind of all around the Midwest greater state region. And each of their theaters had a different sort of theme. So they built a theater in southern Missouri that has an Italian ornate theme. And our theater at Missouri Theater is a Parisian, Louis XIV theme. So it's kind of an interesting story. In 1987, Hugo Vianello, the founder, who was still the first conductor and was still conducting, was looking for, the orchestra was growing, they needed somewhere to perform. At this time, the Missouri Theater, which when it was built was a vaudeville stage, so they had a lot of vaudeville shows that went through there. It had become an actual movie theater. So a lot of people I talk to will talk about coming to see the movies at the Missouri Theater. But in 1987, the movie theater was done. They were going to move out. And so Hugo Vianello approached the company and said, hey, we'd like to rent this space. And they said, well, how about you buy it? So they worked with the state of Missouri and bought the theater in 1987. It was in pretty bad disrepair. It had obviously, some modifications had been made to the original architecture through the years because of it being a movie theater. The volunteer folks were having to clean the bathrooms and fix plumbing and all sorts of things. So at the beginning of 2000, the symphony underwent a large 7-year kind of campaign to raise enough money to renovate the theater. And in 2007, it shut down for an entire year, and they completely restored it in terms of color, paint, all the decorations, all the parts of it, even the big chandelier, which I think weighs about 1 ton. It's very heavy. They fixed all the lights on it. They brought it down. They lowered it down. And it reopened in May of 2008 with a concert by Tony Bennett, a sold-out concert by Tony Bennett, who came and performed. So I tell you all this because this is a typical example of where an orchestra normally performs. When you think of an orchestra, right, you think of a big concert hall that looks really nice, that you come and sit in and you hear the orchestra perform in. That's pretty standard. And I want to talk about how, kind of, in my opinion, orchestras have been sort of trapped in those spaces. Not that they can't perform there, but I do think it's become a barrier. So back when classical music was beginning to start, which was the medieval times, the main source of music they were making was for the church. So you'll see here a picture of a really pretty church, and you see kind of a string octet there performing. So they were in the medieval and Renaissance times, they were writing church music, so most of the music was happening in the space of a church, and at that time churches, again, were big, sort of Gothic, beautiful spaces. And then, as we got into the classical era, suddenly we had very rich people, the aristocracy, who were hiring full-time composers to live on their estates. So this is actually a picture of Esterházy. My master's thesis was on Haydn and Esterházy, his benefactor. So this is Esterházy. This is casually just his performance hall in his home. That's what you see here on the left. So this is where Joseph Haydn, a classical composer, would have had his orchestra perform all his works, and they would have done pretty much nightly concerts for Esterházy and whoever he wanted to invite to them. So again, you notice it's very ornate, it's very big. And what has happened is that as we have changed, as we have evolved as a society, a lot of people don't feel like this is a place of belonging for them, a place like this. And what happened to us is that we found when the pandemic came about, we had to suddenly think about, well, we can't make music in a big space right now because that's not safe, so what are we going to do? And the other thought was, if people aren't coming to see us where we are, maybe we need to go meet them where they are, where they feel safe. Hence coming back to how external spaces create internal changes. And not just in us, but in the people that we're trying to reach. So the pandemic was happening. The Missouri Theater was dark for the first time since 2007 when it was being renovated. No music happened in there for almost a year, which is crazy, because normally there are 200 events in there a year. And by the time we got to the fall of 2020, we were really ready to make music. So we decided, well, why don't we go talk to some of the other businesses in downtown Columbia. Downtown Columbia is a really lovely area with a lot of thriving restaurants and bars and neat shops. And we were like, I bet they're kind of hurting too. So why don't we go see if we can go to one of these spaces that have outdoor facilities and see if we could do some chamber music during a happy hour. So in October of 2020, we picked 4 initial organizations or spaces, businesses that we brought groups to. So you'll see here in this picture, this is the very first place we performed, the first week of October 2020. This is the Mizzou Faculty Brass Quintet. They are performing at a place that was called Prest, which is on a rooftop off of Walnut Street, and you'll see behind it, you can kind of see the sign for Tiger Hotel. If you know of Tiger Hotel, you can kind of orient yourself. And the University of Missouri is right on the other side of that. So the picture's kind of facing south toward the university. And this did 2 things for us. One is, suddenly we were going to a place where maybe there were people there that had never seen anything that we'd done before. And 2 is, we were drawing our people to a different place as well. And it was really interesting to see this juxtaposition of classical music in a bar space and what that did for people. And 4+ years later now, we have a huge following of people that come to this because it's very informal. They can come and get a drink and get some food and just listen to music. And it is translated into people turning their heads to what we're doing. And again, in our field, relevancy is so crucial right now and creating a place of belonging for more people. So that got us kind of really excited about what else we could do and how else could we pivot to go meet people where they are or to involve more people into what we were doing and let them know that we want them to be a part of what we are doing. And so last year, we decided that we wanted to do something to honor Black History Month. And partly that's because one of the barriers to classical music is you think of classical music as a lot of dead white male composers. And there's actually much more to it than that. And so we wanted to let people know that there is more to our field than just Mozart and Haydn and Beethoven. And so we partnered with the Second Missionary Baptist Church, which is one of the very oldest churches in downtown Columbia. You see there in the background their current pastor, Clyde Ruffin, who was a theater professor at Mizzou for a very long time, but is the senior pastor at this church. He was actually in a piece that we performed called Requiem for the Enslaved that was written by a living Black composer named Carlos Simon. And we performed it in the church space 2 nights, and you'll see some of the musicians there. It's a beautiful chamber piece that's kind of coming to terms with slavery. And it was actually written for Georgetown University in response to their reconciling with the fact that their university was built by slaves. And so Carlos Simon had written it for them. It's a very, very powerful piece. But as part of this, we wanted not just to make music, and we weren't trying to do any tokenism here, so we actually had a few of our longtime Black residents of Columbia speak at the beginning and speak about their lived Black experience in Columbia. So we had someone that was kind of speaking about the present day, kind of the 50s to the present day, and then we had a historian talk about the settling of Columbia through slavery and all of those things right before the piece was performed. And again, we were trying to go meet people where they were, and I would say that on both nights of this performance, half of the audience was the congregation of the church. And it was just so thrilling to see them there, and they were very moved by what happened. But that was because we went to where they were. We weren't working hard to try to get them to come to us. We took down that barrier, and we went to meet them where they were. Again, how we were changing our external space to create internal change in people's maybe minds about what we are and what we can do. I talked at the beginning about how the world of the orchestra has been, 2 years ago I was in New York City for the League of American Orchestras Conference, and we were talking a lot about the battle for the couch dwellers. So I don't know about you, but during the pandemic, I got very comfy on my couch, and got caught up on a lot of shows and watched a lot of stuff and subscribed to a lot of streaming platforms. And so it's been hard to get people back from those days. Now, even though now it's safe to come and come to concerts, it's been harder to get people to be involved. And so one of the things we've been talking a lot about in the field of symphonic music is it has to be more than just a concert. There has to be more return on investment for people to attend. So I came back from that trip very inspired, and we created an event that you see here called Sound Bites. It is an immersive experience. Again, doesn't take place in the concert hall. The first 2 years it took place at an event venue outside of Columbia. This year it's at Stevens College in Kimball Ballroom, which is a beautiful social space that they use. But essentially, it pairs courses of music with courses of food with music. The first time we did it, we did Vivaldi's 4 Seasons, and each of the season was a different course. So we worked with a chef, and the chef worked with our music director. And so while you were eating, you were listening to that particular season. And so you were eating spring while you were listening to spring. It has been a monumental success. And the demographic of folks that we saw come to this event was so much lower than our normal audience who we love and adore. But again, we are meeting people where they are and realizing that in order for us to be relevant to age demographics that are younger, we have to do things that will appeal to who they are. So you'll see here, we had candles on the table. You'll see how well decorated it was. You see a picture there of one of our musicians. The musicians are actually in the center of the room, and the tables are surrounding them. It's a very intimate setting. The musicians actually sit at the tables when they're not performing and get to visit with the guests. So we're humanizing musicians. So you're not just seeing people stand up here like I am right now, but they're with you. Musicians actually are humans. They live and breathe, and they do other things. And so I think that's part of the journey we're on, is humanizing who we are and what we are. And to do that, we had to be in a different space than a concert hall, where this is a natural barrier. So I love what I wrote here. Listening and engaging with music does not have to be passive. In fact, it should never be. So even in this situation where you're sitting in a chair, if this was a concert, we would hope that you would be actively engaged listening to the concert, right? But one of the ways that we have tried to help grow that ability in our people, and we're really fortunate to have a music director who's all about audience engagement and audience development, is we have started during our Firefly Music Festival, which is our summer music festival, what we've called a lab concert. And this is an event that allows the audience to move. So the very first one we held, in the very bottom picture there, that is the State Historical Society of Missouri, their new building on Elm Street. It's a beautiful building in downtown Columbia that unfortunately opened right around the pandemic, and we were trying to help get people in the door now that it can be opened. And we did what we called a promenade concert. So the audience, there were chairs there, but there weren't enough chairs for everyone. And the audience members were encouraged to get up and move during the pieces. There was what we called the Avenue of the Brass. So there was actually a walkway between the woodwinds and the strings and the brass and percussion that you could actually walk through while they were playing. You could stand, you could listen, you could walk all the way around. There was a big staircase you could go up and you could walk around. You could travel to all parts of the lobby of this space to hear how it sounded wherever you wanted to be. I'm not gonna lie, we were really nervous if this was going to work or not. We didn't know, if our people would wanna move, but I have never seen so many happy, smiley faces. The minute the music started, people were engaging, they were moving, they were loving every minute of what was happening, and they said, let's do this again. So just this past summer, we did our second one, and those are the top 2 photos there. It happened at Jesse Hall Rotunda. And as you know, Jesse Hall Rotunda has 3 levels. And so we decided that on each of the levels, we wanted to have a different experience. So the bottom level was more traditional. The orchestra was kind of in the center of the room. You can kind of see that there in that photo. And there were chairs around, so you could just sit. And there were 3 sets of music. So after each set, there was about a 5-minute pause so people could switch levels if they wanted to. On the second level, it was the bird's eye view. So you see those people are on the second level there in the photo looking over. So there were chairs there where they could sit. Also on that level were 3 TV screens that had ongoing program notes about the piece being performed. So they would change as the piece was performing and said, in this section, this crescendo means, and it was giving people information. The top level is that top photo there. And we had a local artist there that was helping folks create a piece of art inspired by the music. So you'll see up there I think there's some kids and their mom, but we had all ages. So if you were on that level, as you were listening, you could help create this art. There were paintbrushes, you could use your fingers, and they created 2 big murals that we actually have in our office now. Again, just letting people know that listening to music, participating in music in that way does not have to be passive. It can be active. And sometimes that's hard to create in a concert hall setting. Again, finding a new external space to create that internal change. Another way that we have been really focusing on helping people know who we are, where they are, is our touring program. And so I want to think, I sat with some really great students during lunch and they brought this up to me, but when the Missouri Symphony was first started back in the 70s, Hugo used to go to 9 different rural communities and do concerts. Unfortunately, expenses have raised and we can't, I wish we could do that, but we have been trying to build back and get to 4 or 5. So this past summer we went down to Camdenton. We've gone to the Lake of the Ozarks for many, many years. We added Moberly back. This next year, we're looking for somewhere on this side, so it could be Fulton. I recently spoke to the Rotary Club. It could be Mexico, I don't know. And then we're also looking at Boonville at Thespian Hall. We're just trying to make it easier to find people where they are, and by doing that, we're creating that internal change that may lead them to come meet us where we are, which is in the concert hall. I found this quote, and it was by William L. Kahn in an article he wrote called "Can Symphonic Music Become Popular Music?" And because believe it or not, once upon a time, this music was the popular music. You know, in the time of Mozart and Haydn, this is what primarily people listened to. You know, there wasn't Taylor Swift, there wasn't Billie Eilish. You know, there was none of these folks. So this is what people were listening to. And I really resonated with the second part of this quote, that to make symphonic music a part of the mix of music genres that enrich the lives of common people, to make other kind of music rather more consistent with the option paradigms, to make symphonic music a part of the mix of genres that they have. So, you know, we are not trying to convert people to just be classical music listeners. We're trying to encourage them to add it to their palette, to expand their palette, right? You can listen to Taylor Swift and listen to Haydn. They can go hand in hand. They can exist together. And this bottom quote that I have here is from part of our vision statement for the Missouri Symphony, that to enrich the lives of the everyday person, we have to meet them where they are and where they feel safe. Just going to say that one more time because I think it's really powerful. To enrich the lives of the everyday person, we have to meet them where they are and where they feel safe. And that might not be in a room like this. It might be on a street corner. It might be in a park. It might be in a church. And we hope that by doing that, they feel that they can then engage with us in different ways. And then maybe we can bring them in to the theater. Music is for everyone, everywhere. And again, I have some examples of places that we played. You'll see the park there. I kind of cheated. That's actually the Missouri River behind them. That's out at the A-frame at the bluff top at Roachport. We played there. Broadway Brewery is another one of the places we play in Columbia. And then, of course, you see the Missouri Theater there as well. So we are a microcosm because we are certainly a small orchestra. Our orchestra size is on the smaller side of all the kind of orchestras in America. But I know that but because of that, that allows us to pivot and make changes a lot easier than a lot of other bigger orchestras can do. We no longer own the Missouri Theater, so that means we can kind of go wherever we want. We're not tied to that space necessarily. And I think that the work that we are doing is parallel with the work that a lot of other orchestras are doing across this country to increase the relevancy of what orchestral, symphonic, classical, whatever word you want to use, music is in our country today. So I have another question. How many of you listen to classical music? Great. How many of you listen to it at least once a week? That's great. How many of you listen to it once a month? Okay. How many of you listen to it to study? Great. Yeah, that's a great way to do it. Right before I close here, right before I got up here on stage, I was sent a video by another nonprofit friend, and it was from the Stephen Colbert Show, and he had a doctor on the show, and in the clip he said, we know that endorphins are released from exercise, and he said, is there any other way that endorphins are released? And the doctor said, yes, Stephen. In fact, the next best way that endorphins are released are when listening to music. And I would argue that, sure, all kinds of music can make that happen, but symphonic music can really release those endorphins. They really can get you in a place where you feel well, where you feel whole. And I would just suggest that you think about giving it a chance. And again, if the concert hall is not your place, there's other ways that you can find to listen to it. And with that, I'll open up to any questions.
Thank you, Trent. Thank you so much. Can we give a round of applause for Trent, please?
Thank you.
Is there a student ambassador? Okay, perfect.
Is there anywhere where we can find your concert schedules?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, if you go to themosey.org, our entire season is located there. I will just point out, in May, we're doing a really awesome concert with the music of Studio Ghibli. So if you're an anime fan, you're going to want to check that out. Yeah, it's going to be really cool. There's some great music from those shows. Our Black History Month concert is going to be exploring the history of Douglas High School and what it came from and the history of like Black education in Columbia. So that's going to be a really great one too in February. Thanks for the question.
When it comes to exploring new spaces, when you're performing, I would assume that would come with accessibility risks for individuals with mobility issues. How do you combat that? Because it seems like inclusivity is a big pillar of what you do.
Yes, thank you. That's such a great, it is. We have an idea committee, that A being accessibility, so thank you for that question. We do, when we are courting spaces, we do make sure that they are ADA accessible. We are also an autism-friendly business, so we've been through training to create like a safe room and some things for people with autism. We actually are working on having a sensory-friendly concert that we hope to do next year. Again, as another way to engage families that maybe they don't feel like they can bring their kids because of that. So that is something we think about a lot when going to different spaces.
So, like,
with like modern trends and stuff like that, people have like placed like a lot more focus on value. Like, you know, certain like fast food chains have kind of lost their way when it comes to the convenience of it all. And you've mentioned like, you know, like sound bites and stuff like that. So what is value to you, and do you think that could like attract more, you know, consumers or something like that?
What are we looking at for the value? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so. Our big things are, I think, and I hate to say this because nobody wants this, but we are kind of a best kept secret of Columbia, because I don't think enough people know that we are producing high quality music. Of course, we're not St. Louis or Kansas City, but we certainly are creating the next high quality symphonic music in the state. And so once we get people to us, I mean, that speaks for itself. The musicians are wonderful, the music is wonderful. But with that, as I mentioned before, we are thinking a lot about what's going on in the lobby before these concerts. So I will, for instance, our annual holiday concert is in December. This year we're doing like holiday market. So we're creating kind of that European model where they have the Christmas markets, and we're gonna have a lot of local vendors in the lobby where people could do some last minute holiday shopping, as well as attend a concert. So we're trying to create a 2-for-1 sort of situation and we'll have pictures with Santa or the Sugar Plum Fairy for families. So we're trying to create that extra value in that way.
Other questions? Other questions?
Hi, I know that you are going to be talking about nonprofits a little bit later, more broadly. I have a lot of students interested in nonprofit work, and so I'm just wondering if you could maybe talk for a second on what you see as maybe a couple of things that help nonprofits to really thrive, things they can do to thrive in a space like a market like Columbia's.
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. So Columbia is so unique in that we are certainly a small city, but we have 150 nonprofit, we have a huge number of nonprofit organizations. I think for us all to thrive, we have learned, and again, I think this kind of came out of the pandemic again, that we need each other. And so we do a lot of collaborations, not only with other arts organizations, but we partner, for instance, the Boys and Girls Club of Columbia. We do a toy drive for them at our holiday concert. We have some seating reserved for their families to come and see the concert for free. So a lot of it is partnering with those other organizations. We have a program called Mosey Cares. So we have corporate sponsors that will give us money so that then we can pay our musicians to go and play at other nonprofit galas, but they don't have to pay for it. So they don't have to worry about that cost. We're taking care of that for them. So just ways that we find that we can work together, and where our missions and our values can intersect is a lot of work of what's happening in Columbia right now.
Other questions? Other questions for Trent? All right. Well, thank you, Trent, so much for your time. Everyone, one round of applause.
Thank you all. Appreciate you.